Hi, this is Jack Downs with your a video on introductory web terms. A couple of things first I forgot to mention in my welcome video. Hear any strange noises? There's construction going on in the Hawkins Hall pond outside my window, and it's super hot in here, so I have a fan going. A couple of things I want to tell you though about the Moodle page. Look at all these check marks over here. Some of these, like this one here, are available for you to use completely if you want to. It's optional. If you check that checkbox, you'd be giving yourself a message that you already watched that thing or did that reading. But some of these, like for the assignments, there's a first page assignment, which is going to be due on Tuesday. I'll go over in your next video. It can only be checked by the system, by Moodle, when you complete that. It should be automatically checked when you've submitted an assignment. So that's what those check marks are. Okay, let's continue with the presentation. Okay, before we begin, a little bit of background and history. And by the way, you should have read chapters 1 and 2 before you view this presentation. And this presentation, like all presentations, is available also in PDF format in the folder at the bottom of this week. Of course, the internet kind of was born in the 50s and 60s as a military functional way of exchanging information packets. In the 80s, we had ARPANET, which was the military ancestor of the internet. It was gradually opened to the public. In '92, we had the first graphical browser. That was how the web really started to catch on and was sort of born. Until you had a graphical browser, it was a very different thing. I was working on web pages in the late 90s on something called the Mining Company, which later became About.com. What was About.com? Well, it's still around. It kind of went through the internet bubble and then crash. I'm not working there any longer. They ended up being sold to a magazine company of all things. But that was my experience with the internet. But boy, has that things changed. The way we made pages back then in the 90s and even the early 2000s is completely different than the way we make pages now. We have CSS now. We have HTML5 now. Things have changed a lot. So, by the way, if you are talking to anybody who learned this stuff 5 years ago, yeah, even 5 years ago, and they tell you how it should work, things are different now. So we're going to learn the newest versions of HTML and CSS, and the way way things work is different. So be careful taking advice that's older than a few years old. Okay, let's continue. So what is the internet? I want you to know these terms both because they're important, but also because you could be quizzed on them. Network of interconnected computers. A cooperative system. In other words, there's no big dictator in charge of the internet that does everything. It's a cooperative system. And we have to agree upon the rules about the ways that information is exchanged so everybody can understand it. These agreed upon rules are called protocols. There's lots of protocols for different ways we exchange information on the internet. The internet is not just the web, not just the World Wide Web. The internet's a lot more. Of course, there's email. There's protocols for email. You ever heard of IMAP? That's one. There's actually several others for email protocols. There's something called FTP, File Transfer Protocol. That's another protocol that's used, and it's for transferring large files, not necessarily for viewing them. And there's an agreed upon set of rules for how we do that. And of course, hypertext documents, which is what we know of as the web. There's agreed upon set of rules for that. That's HTTP, which is that protocol. More on protocols in a minute. What is hypertext? Well, here's some hypertext right here. I'm hovering over it. It's this link that I would click on. It would take me someplace else. Text in one online document that automatically links to another is hypertext. It's fundamental to the World Wide Web. What is hypertext markup language, or HTML? You should know, by the way, that's what that means. It's the language we use to create web documents. It's the underlying structure of the information. It is not a programming language. It's a markup language. That means it's the way we add structure to information that's already there. We add information about it, meta information, if you want it, you could say. We use HTML to create the structure of web documents. In other words, it's like when you're building a house, The structure is what? It's all the frame, the 2x4s, the plumbing, the electrical stuff. It's not what color it is. It's not how pretty it is. It's not what the landscaping is like. It's a strong structure, and you have to make sure when you call something a 2x4, everyone has to agree that's a 2x4. That's what HTML is. We describe the information properly. What's a heading? What's a list? So on. Even though the display may not be what we want, it doesn't matter. It's describing the information properly, adding the structure. But then, therefore, what's cascading style sheets, or CSS? Well, that's the presentation. It's like, what color are you going to paint the house? What is the landscape going to be like? What color shingles are you going to use on the top of the house? And so on. So CSS is a style sheet language we use to modify HTML. CSS comes after HTML. It describes the underlying structure. CSS controls fonts, colors, background images, page layout, and lots more. We'll learn HTML first. Where can you see these things, CSS and HTML? Well, you can see them in any web page if you like. For instance, I'll go to the SUNY Plattsburgh page. If I do a right-click on this page, or any page, by the way, I'm using Chrome, which I suggest you might want to use, or Firefox. I would avoid Internet Explorer for this class, if only because it's got some bugs and issues, and especially some of the earlier versions. But try Chrome or Google, Chrome or Firefox. And any page, and this would be the same to some degree in any browser, if I do a right-click, I can say View Page Source, View Source. What do I see? Well, when it comes up, and I'm afraid my browser's a little slow, I'm going to see a whole bunch of stuff that looks like gibberish. This is the HTML. That was a complicated page, the SUNY Plattsburgh homepage. There is a lot of stuff there. But if I look through it carefully, I'd see these are lists, admissions, directions, maps, academics. Oh yeah, I saw those lists there. There's other information. I would gradually see the text. I would see images listed here that are images that I can understand. So if I look through it carefully, I can start to see things that make sense and things that are on the page. Gave one campus program $5,000, so on and so forth. And by the way, the CSS is linked to here also. Let's look at a simpler page. That will make more sense, perhaps. How about this page? This is an extremely simple page. Jen's Kitchen. Can I look at the source? Of course I can. View page source. This makes a lot more sense. But the underlying structure is still the same. We start by saying, let's use HTML5. That's your doc type. That's what that means. You can read more about this in your text. Then we say, oh, by the way, we're doing HTML. We open the HTML. We open the head. That means the head area, this area here, is the information about the page, including the title of the page. What is the title of the page? Jen's Kitchen. That means it's what is on the tab. It's like the name of the page. When I hover over the tab, I see Jen's Kitchen. Then I have a link to a style sheet, which is CSS. It even says CSS.css. By the way, this page is .html too. Good. Then I have a body area. The body is what's displayed in my browser. I see something called a food GIF. It's an image, IMG, SRC. SRC means where is it and what is it called? It's called Foods GIF. And I see something that said Jen's Kitchen. By the way, there's my Foods GIF, and there's the words that say Jen's Kitchen. I have a paragraph, a P. It's a paragraph. This was an H1, a heading. And a paragraph, another paragraph. This paragraph is text. Some of it's in a strong, and some of it's in an EM. Strong means it's important. EM means say this with emphasis. What does that mean? It's a paragraph. If you love reading about cooking and eating, that's important. So on and so forth. This site is for you. That's said with emphasis. Then there's a your pal, another image. Guess what? You can see that there too. Your pal, another image. Okay, let's look at this as you'll be looking at it in class. I have an offline version of that same file now called Jen's Kitchen. And I'm going to do a right-click on it and say Edit with Notepad++, which is what you should have already downloaded, Notepad++, or a similar program for some other operating system, and you should already have opened it up and started to look around about it. By the way, I have word wrap on, otherwise my lines would go right off the page. So that's what word wrap does. I can make this bigger or smaller with a Control+ or a Control- also. What you see here is the same information you saw before, okay, when we viewed the source. And in fact, I can look at it. I can say run, launch in Chrome, And guess what? It will open up in Chrome, and it'll take just a minute. There it is, Jen's Kitchen. It looked the same as when it was online. So I can view through Notepad++ the page in a web browser. I said I'm using Chrome again still. Okay, I'm in Notepad++ again. What if I get rid of this style sheet? Let's just delete it out. I'm going to save it. And now what if I run it? Run, launch in Chrome. Well, the information is still there. The image is still there. It still says Jen's Kitchen. It still has a paragraph. It still has the strong and the EM. But some things are different. What's different? Let's take a look. There's no margins. There's no color. There's the size of the text has changed a little bit. The font has changed. So there we go. That's the difference. This is HTML without any CSS, and this is what it looks like when we add the CSS. Where does the CSS come from? It comes from the style sheet, which is linked. It could be sitting right here in the document, but it's linked. What does that style sheet look like? I'll show you your first touch of CSS so you can see it as we get going. I can also open it, edit in Notepad++. Once you install Notepad++, you can right-click on any HTML or CSS file and choose to edit that way. And already, you should see that body. What was body? Well, it was everything that was displayed in the browser window. It's given a font. It's given a width. It's given margins. H1. You saw the H1. It was that heading. It said Jen's Kitchen. It's given italic, a size, and a font. Georgia, Verdana. Those should be familiar names. It's also given a color. So using the strange RGB code that you'll learn more about. It's given margins also. An IMG is given margins. And then a special IMG that's in the H1, in the heading, is given a margin. And the small is given a color. So the small is given a color. So this stuff is all working. It's linked to this HTML document. It modifies the HTML document. And when I run it, it uses the HTML and the CSS together to give me structure and presentation. Okay, back to what I'm supposed to be talking to you about. What is a URL? It's a uniform resource locator. You think of it as the web address. Here's an example of a URL, right? HTTP, that's the protocol. It tells the server to use Hypertext Transfer Protocol. www, that's the host name. There it is. It says use the World Wide Web Network. Learningwebdesign.com, that's the domain name. That's the thing you would go buy or rent, essentially, if you get your own domain name. Then beyond the domain name, we have the directory path, 4E, materials, chapter, whatever. That's like the folders you have to go through to find the file. And in kitchen.html, that's the document, the actual document you're going to use. When we combine the directory path and the document name, we get the absolute path. Some more details, default files. How come when I looked at the SUNY Plattsburgh homepage, I was seeing a document, but there's no document listed here? It's because that's a default file. When we have a index.html in our web page folder, it's called the home page. Some sites use default.html. Most common is index.html. That's what we will use. There's other default home page ideas, but essentially it means when you just give that link to that general website, that is going to display that file without having, you don't have to call for a document. Browser, of course, is the software we use to interpret web documents. And here is a list of some. There's many other things now, many technologies that use browsers. The server is the software, the computer somewhere out there on the internet that holds the web page. The server is a computer running specialized software that serves up web pages and resources. Okay, I'm going to move to the next page for about the IP addresses, and I'm going to have to do this as a second part of the video.